Chapter 8 Abandoned Ship. At 12:10 a.m., Captain Smith entered the wireless room. He told the operators to send the call for help. Immediately, they sent the Morse code distress signal CQD. A short while later, they tapped out SOS, the brand new international call for help. This was one of the first times in history SOS was used. Three ships replied to the signal, the closest being the Carpathia, but it was 58 miles away. How could it reach the Titanic in time? Even at its top speed, the Carpathia was about 4 hours away. Passengers began to fill the outer decks of the ship. By this time, some could tell they were walking on a slight slope. Still, most didn't want to believe that anything so terrible had happened, that lifeboats were needed. Indoors, the ship was warm and comfortable. Why risk getting into a tiny lifeboat on the cold, dark sea, especially since the Titanic was supposed to be unsinkable? When the first lifeboat was lowered at 12:45 a.m., it was less than half full. 10 minutes later, officers launched the first of 8 white distress flares into the sky. Each flare exploded with a loud bang. Would another ship see them? First and second class passengers waited on the boat deck. Some were dressed in warmer clothes. The orchestra set themselves up and began playing cheerful music. Downstairs in the lower decks, there was more confusion as third class passengers ran down hall after hall. They tried to find stairways that led to the top deck. However, it was like finding the way out of a maze. Many did not speak English and could not read the signs. Hundreds of third class passengers never made it to the deck where the lifeboats were. As the bow of the ship kept sinking, the rest of the Titanic tilted higher and higher out of the water. Furniture was sliding across the decks. By now, it became clear that everyone needed to get off the sinking ship fast. But not everyone could, not with only 20 lifeboats, and there had never been a safety drill either. Passengers didn't know what to do. The ship lifeboats. Titanic had over 2,200 people on board, but its 20 lifeboats only had room for 1,178 people. There were 16 regular lifeboats and 4 inflatable ones. The White Star Line hadn't broken any laws, though. A boat the Titanic's size was only required to have enough lifeboats for 962 people. Most ship owners believed that in an emergency, another ship would be near enough to rescue everyone. The job of the lifeboats would be to take passengers from the ship in trouble to the rescue ship. The lifeboats would serve as ferries, taking one group of passengers after another to safety. No one imagined a situation in which everyone would need to be evacuated on lifeboats all at the same time. The crew worked to load the lifeboats quickly, but passengers started panicking as they realized not everyone would be saved. One officer shot his revolver in the air as a group of frightened passengers fought to get on a lifeboat. Another officer had the crew form a ring around the lifeboat. The men locked their arms together. Only women and children were allowed through. According to all ships' rules, women and children were to get in the boats first. John Jacob Astor IV said goodbye to his wife, Madeline. He tossed his gloves to her as the lifeboat was lowered. She would never see him again. Isidor Straus urged his wife, Ida, to get on a lifeboat. She refused. We have lived together for many years. Where you go, I go. Captain Smith dismissed the men in their wireless room. You can do no more. Now it's every man for himself. That meant crew members should try to save themselves in whatever way they could. As for Captain Smith, he did not intend to go anywhere. He would go down with his ship. The Titanic was indeed his final voyage, but there would be no peaceful years of retirement for him. At 2:05 a.m., the last lifeboat launched into the sea. Over 1,500 passengers remained on board, screaming in panic, grabbing railings to hold. Some people decided to jump into the frigid ocean, hoping to swim to safety. It was now 2:18 a.m. The whole bow of the ship was no longer visible, and the stern rose nearly vertical toward the sky. All the Titanic's lights went out. With a terrible sound, the ship snapped in two pieces and sank. Only 2 hours and 40 minutes after the Titanic hit the iceberg, it was gone. One passenger in a lifeboat later wrote, "As the Titanic plunged deeper and deeper, we could see her stern rising higher and higher until her lights began to go out. As the last lights on the stern went out, we saw her plunge. Then the screams began and seemed to last eternally." Only about 700 passengers had made it onto the lifeboats. They watched in horror. Some sat in silence, others wailed. Many could not grasp what they were seeing. It had all happened so fast. One passenger said, "The sounds of people drowning are something that I cannot describe to you, and neither can anyone else. It is the most dreadful sound, and there's a terrible silence that follows it." Some passengers in the lifeboats wanted to row to those in the water and help them, but others were frightened that swimmers would overwhelm the lifeboats. In the end, only one lifeboat returned to try to save anybody. In the water, some held on to deck chairs as mini rafts. Even with the life jackets, people couldn't stay alive for more than 20 minutes in water that was only 28 degrees. Soon the cries of those in the sea began to quiet. A woman in lifeboat number 4 watched shooting stars in the sky. She had never seen so many. She remembered a legend that said every time you see a shooting star, someone dies. Now there was nothing for survivors to do but wait and hope for rescue. They were all alone on the cold, dark sea. Timeline of disaster. 11:40 p.m. The Titanic hits the iceberg. 12:05 a.m. Captain Smith orders the crew to uncover the lifeboats and alert passengers. 12:15 a.m. First wireless call for help. 12:45 a.m. First lifeboat lowered. 2:05 a.m. Last lifeboat lowered. 2:10 a.m. Last wireless call sent. 2:20 a.m. The Titanic sinks.